guys, we are Mattnco, and today we'll be presenting our product called SkillHub. I believe all the teams here, we all started at the same place with the same requirements for the Lens project to create an application that user can keep track of everything that they have learned with evidence included for the meaningful skills that they have gained. The application should also act as an online project planner and also a portfolio. And that is right where SkillHub comes in. SkillHub can be interpreted as a place that allows users to store skills and the evidence of learning. SkillHub does not only allow users to create and manage their personal portfolios, but also offer a full project management suite that is easy to use, easy to track, and easy to manage. Some of the key features that SkillHub included can easily be found right on the homepage after you register and log into our application. But just to save us some time, we also include it here on the slide. SkillHub brings the abilities to create, manage projects with its own set of sprints, events, deadlines, and milestones that can be viewed on a monthly planner with live updating features. This application also allows users to manage group, user, and their user details, and most importantly, to create skills, import evidence, and keep them in a personal portfolio. We, the team at SkillHub, hope that every user can find this as a memory palace that they can always go back and reflect on all the amazing things that they have learned. Now heading up to Yuan and Amy for the demo of some key features.
So now I'm gonna demoing our group feature. So as a user with admin role, we can create new group. But there are some default group, which is teaching staff and members without a group. And when we're creating a new group, we just need to provide short name and long name for the group. Yeah. Once a group created, we have option to adding the user by search for their name and click on their name, and then it will add them to the group. We also can select more than one user from members without a group and move them to the desired group. Now, when we search for their name, members, which part of the group will be their name will be highlighted by blue color. When we're clicking on their name, we can remove them from the group, and we also have ability to copy more than one user from the group. So when the user create a new group, a new student groups, we can select a couple more users from another group and then copy them so that user will be part of two groups. And now I will demoing the group setting feature. Once the group is created, we can see there's option for group settings, which when we click on that will direct us to group settings page, and then we can edit the group details. This group repository settings also allow us to connect to the GitLab repository by providing API key and project ID. And then here we can see some commits from the GitLab repository. And now I'll pass to Ewan.
So, one of the main features of SkillHub is the creation and tracking of a student's portfolio. This is done through the Evidence tab in SkillHub, where a user can create, edit, delete, and sort their own evidence. As you can see, when the evidence page is first opened, the user is met with a mostly blank screen and controls to start adding evidence to their portfolio. When the user is ready to start adding to their portfolio, they can click the Add button and fill out the appropriate sections with information about what they want to add to their portfolio. Adding tags and categories to the evidence allows the user to sort the evidence by types, and additional proofs such as websites, users that contributed, and code commits can all be attached to their evidence. Once a user has created evidence, it is then possible for them to come back and edit any part of their evidence that may change with time, or add extra information if it becomes relevant. Everything that was entered during the creation of the evidence can also be changed if or when they come back to make changes. Selecting a category in either the navigation panel or on a piece of evidence allows the user to see all of the evidence in SkillHub, given that category by both themselves and other users within the system. Selecting a tag in either the navigation panel or on a piece of evidence functions much the same as categories, but tags are user-defined, allowing users the freedom to tag evidence however and with whatever they wish. Users can also decide to delete evidence if, for example, it is no longer relevant to their portfolio or they no longer want to display it. This is done by clicking the delete icon on a piece of evidence, which removes it from the system. Doing this also removes any user-created tags that only existed on that specific piece of evidence. A user can also view another user's evidence. This is done through the Users tab, where all of SkillHub's users are displayed. Once a user is selected to be viewed and the relevant project is chosen, then the selected user's evidence is shown and can be filtered and viewed, but not modified or deleted. Thank you.
Sweet, so I'm going to talk about some things our team learned about the Scrum process, in particular the planning part of Scrum. I'm going to talk about some things, why planning is important and what we didn't do so well and what we did to solve these issues. Let's look at how planning went for Sprint 4. We thought planning would take 250 hours. Sorry, the sprint would take 250 hours, but we ended up spending 360 hours of work in that sprint. This extra 100 hours of work indicated that we had poor planning. This poor planning was due to bad task allocation and bad time estimates towards these tasks. As you can see here, we were vastly underestimating the amount of time each task would take. This led to us under-delivering in terms of amount of features and quality of our product. However, as the sprints went on, we got better at estimating our tasks, and here are some tasks from our latest sprints, and you can see our estimates have become a lot better. This made it a lot easier to deliver on promises that we had made at the beginning of sprints. Now we're going to look at some of our burn down charts. A burn down chart tracks the progress of a team's progress throughout the sprint. And the green line shows how much work the team has done, and the red line shows how much work still needs to be done. Ideally, the team is working consistently throughout the sprint, so the red line should follow quite closely to the grey line. Whoops, in Sprint 3 we didn't do too well, and this was mainly because our planning was insufficient. Looking at Sprint 4, we tried to remedy some problems we had in Sprint 3, but we were unable to come up with adequate solutions to our planning problems. So we did a little bit better, but as you can see at the end here, we were still struggling to finish tasks at the end of the sprint. Moving on to Sprint 5, we really had a look in our retrospective in Sprint 4 to come up with specific achievable solutions to identified issues. And this led to this burn down chart, which is not ideal, but it's a lot better than our previous two burn down charts. And this led to us delivering a much higher quality product, and we were able to pass and deliver more stories. This taught us two valuable lessons, the first being the importance of planning and how useful it is, and the second being how important it is to come up with specific achievable solutions to identified issues.
So in terms of front end, we learned a lot about what it takes to be concise and consistent. Due to the difficulties of combining designs between the two development teams at the beginning of the project, it was very difficult to add newly designed pages that seemed to fit somewhere in the project, given there was no theme. Therefore, we had to spend a lot of time improving the front end, which eventually did create a proper theme for the entire project and was consistently used later during development. We realized this was a major issue primarily through feedback from people testing the interface, who found the original design very old school, suggesting that each page was clunky and different from the rest. This made it feel like you were using a different application with every page you navigated to. The feedback from the new design showed we improved the user interface and gave users the ability to be given more visible tips and error messages using the better utilization of space. The initial images here show a less developed and thought out design that is not clearly apparent in functionality. Users claimed that they would easily get lost trying to navigate certain parts of this application. With an improved user interface, the user is presented with what they expect to see, with more familiar and modern design, while still staying unique from your typical planner application. There is enhanced clarity and more fluid navigation now, by pushing off navigation buttons to the side to focus the attention to the key information. The consistency of color from the new theme focuses the attention to the more important information on the page, splitting it up into sections. Mobile view is very important to all users, as everyone will have a mobile device on hand, which they may regularly use with the application. Our old design was just a compressed version of the web view, whereas here, by sectioning up our new design, when compressing it into mobile view, it now rearranges the page into a design that more resembles that of a downloadable phone application. For people who always have a phone on hand, this is necessary for quickly keeping up to date on new information on the go, and taught us about the importance of regarding ease of access with different forms of everyday technology. With every application, it's really important to be scalable so that you can add more features later on. Our original design was increasingly difficult to add features, as here you can see on the groups page, where we did not take into account the need for a group settings page or a search functionality. Overall, this design was quite confusing to navigate, and in this example, very empty. The new design makes use of icons to stand out and displays a lot of section information in one go, which minimizes the need for excessive navigation and improved user feedback regarding simplicity. Pass it on to Matt.
So I'm going to talk about some of the key technologies that we use during this project. So each of these represents a different aspect of the process, from the front end to the back end and the development operations. We already had varying knowledge of the things that presented here from other courses or from previous experience, but this was our first major experience in like an actual application. Because we started instantly without the opportunity to familiarize ourselves with the technology, most of our learning came from mistakes. And the graph on the bottom right there shows the number or the percentage of code lines in the project. Bootstrap was a pretty big lifeline for our project. Bootstrap provides a framework for pre-built components and functionality that can be easily added to our HTML pages. Each of these components comes with pre-built styles, animations, and functionality, which enables us to have consistent UI throughout the application that's also familiar to the user. Initially, we started by not using Bootstrap and just using basic HTML and CSS, which was quite tedious and problematic for us. Often parts of the page would look completely different on different display sizes, and error messages would shift positioning in ways that we didn't really expect. After properly integrating Bootstrap, the process of creating UI and sped up significantly, and not only resulted in shorter code segments, but also a lot more polished designs. This was part of the reason that HTML and CSS and JavaScript took up such a small section of the code in the previous slide, just because we use Bootstrap so much. Java is the main language that we used for the server-side processes. While the HTML and JavaScript were used to interact with the users, the server managed the data and functionality of the application. When the server receives a request, it first runs some methods altering or fetching specific data, and then sends the newly formatted pages back to the client with data injected using Timeleaf. Although all of us have had previous experience with Java language, none of us had experienced Timeleaf before or anything similar, meaning we did a lot of things wrong in the beginning. Example of one way that we went wrong was how we interacted with the server. Originally, we had every button request to the server and as a form, which forced the server to reload. This was extremely inefficient and jarring for the user, as it would interrupt the flow. Eventually, we tried a different technique, having JavaScript. Instead of relying on a server to change the layout of the page, we receive the page in one whole component and use JavaScript to show and hide different aspects depending on what's been selected. To manage the updating of data, we created extra methods on the server and would return small sections of the page that we could swap out. In some situations, instead of returning a visual HTML fragment, we would just return the JSON data individually where it could be manipulated by the JavaScript. The final major area of learning was GitLab and DevOps. All of us have had previous experience using Git to manage our code, but most of us had only ever used it for individual or paired projects, and none of us had ever used its pipeline features. So throughout the course, we gained a lot of confidence with Git, which resulted in faster development and less conflicts as the project went on. The key new aspect of GitLab that we learned in this course was about automating pipelines and development. We learned how to integrate automated tests, monitoring features, and building pipelines into GitLab. This meant that when we uploaded changes to the repository, it automatically let us know if something was broken, which ended up being very helpful for us. Furthermore, we integrated the pipeline with 2 separate VM servers. So we had 2 branches, one for ongoing changes and one for release changes that would automatically deploy to either the test or production servers. This added a lot more complexity to the application, as we had to manage separate variables depending on the environment, which is something that took us quite a while to figure out. One of the main challenges that we came across was making sure that each server connected to a different database and that the links within the application did contain the test or prod URL. And we found the solution to that was having environment variables stored directly in GitLab that were unique to the test and production branches. So the most important thing that we learned in this project as a team was about teamwork. And the most important thing we learned is that constant, consistent communication is vital in any team to produce a high-quality deliverable. We also found that just by keeping in touch with each other was a huge motivator for us to continue working on our project. So this graph was exported from our Slack Analytics, which is the main communication facilitator for our team in the project. You can observe 3 pretty noticeable dips in communication activity during the course of this project. The times that we had less communication coincided with our worst sprints during the year, which can be observed from these burn down charts. The first 2 drops in activity led to sprints ending with only 15% and 9% of the promised features delivered, while the last sprint broke major areas of our application that were previously working. These 3 failures can be linked to the lack of proper communication within our team, which unfortunately is something we didn't find out until it was too late. We also learnt that by doing pair programming and co-located programming, we can share the knowledge of our code base around the team, and it also helps tackling difficult aspects much easier to do. So this is an example of one of the work logs for a ticket, where the assigned person was really struggling, but when they started pair programming, the ticket was much easier to do thanks to a fresh set of eyes looking at the problem. We also used IntelliJ as our code editor for the project, which has this awesome Code With Me feature, allowing multiple developers to modify code in the same instance at the same time, which we found was a huge help in our co-located programming. We also learnt that we shouldn't really be afraid of our teammates or to ask them questions. We sort of learnt that everyone's on the same team and working towards the same goal. I think most of us had an incorrect assumption going into the project that asking questions would make you look dumb or incapable of doing the work. But in reality, there were always people willing to help, and in most cases, asking questions and getting help from a teammate will benefit them as well, as we found by teaching our teammates about new features. It actually improved our knowledge of it, as well as obviously made the ticket go faster. So I guess to summarize this slide, it's okay to not know things. We as a team learned a lot about code reviews for this project. For those unfamiliar, code reviews are a process in which they're a vital step in the code process where committed code is reviewed by another team member before being pushed to production. There are a lot of cases throughout the year where we submitted code for review but didn't properly test what we wrote because we sort of assumed that the reviewer would test that for us. Obviously that's a pretty big problem because you can imagine if the reviewer thinks they're sort of the same thing, and then that sort of causes a lot of broken elements in our application. So the main thing that we took away from code reviews is that it's important to properly review new features, but it's also important to keep the size of the code reviews down so the reviewer doesn't feel overwhelmed or miss any important aspects. That's it. Thanks.